What's up, guys? Welcome back to the channel and some more coverage here in our Birthright review series where we're looking at all the different domains. And today we have Alamie for you guys. So again, we're getting through the domains of the Heartlands, and this is unfortunately one of the shorter entries here, so there is a little bit less that you might find in some of the more extensive ones, like the double-sided or double-page entries. So that does leave you a little bit of room to develop that with your DM, and if you're playing this nation, again, gives you a little bit more creative freedom there, and just what you might have at the outset as far as like standing armies or things like that are concerned. So this one is an interesting one, by the way. So it's neutral evil, and it is recommended for play, meaning you can play it as a player. It's a fairly sizable one, so several provinces, 9 in fact, but all is not well within those provinces. So if you check out our previous video in the series on Tornin, you can get a little bit of background there as well, since that one is a more complete entry. And a lot of the issues that you'll find with trying to run Alamie is that, I think it was like 100 years ago in the background story, basically Tuornin broke off of what used to be a larger Alamie, and so basically it broke away as a separate state. And ever since then, that's sort of been the driving force with what Alamie is trying to pursue politically, is trying to get that territory back. Thus far, to no success whatsoever. And so you can imagine a giant sort of a duchy with like 18 provinces or something like that, basically suddenly losing half of that, and in some ways the more profitable part of it too. So as we can see here at the top, so basically you do own most of the law in your territory, although Gilder Kalian of Endir has a significant stake in that too. But that being said, none of the law that you have really is like raised to the maximum of what it could be, and in fact in some you have no law, as you can see there with what is it, Nortmore, Soutmore, and Sorliace. So lots to work on there. The temple situation doesn't get too much mention in our brief description here, but if we look, we have the Western Imperial Temple, and I think what's the other one here? Let's see. Oh yeah, the Celestial Jewel of Saramie. So not necessarily two temples that are going to be all that overtly hostile to each other. But that being said, though, the Western Imperial Temple is again very militaristic. So, but that's something again that a smart ruler can sort of play one off the other side to positive effect for yourself. On the guild side, it again gets messy. You have a lot of other stakeholders, and we'll talk about that in just a moment. On the sources side is basically Cain, and there's pros and cons of trying to get aid out of him, but there's not much mentioned in the description here. But the bigger issues again are going to be on the law side, just developing your nation in general, and then the guild situation as well. So as you can kind of also tell from the levels of the provinces here, by and large, mostly unsettled, with a couple of level 1s. Those are, I think one of them is bordering more towards the 5 peaks. We'll talk about that in a second. You do have one, which interestingly isn't even your capital, but Alarroin, as a level 5, so that's actually pretty useful there. So your regent, should you choose to accept the current regent and his family, basically. So you're playing as Carolon Alam, who's only a level 2 fighter. So, but that being said, he has a pretty solid bloodline at 46, but is in fact neutral evil. So again, something to get used to, that you'd be playing basically a neutral evil kingdom and a ruler. So he's a descendant of the original Duke, and basically, the best way to describe him: greedy and avaricious. And honestly, doesn't really care so much about his realm, and has sort of bigger plans in mind, but again, more or less lacks the skill to really achieve that with all the things that are going on. So, and if nothing else, dreams of, again, retaking the empire, which just realistically isn't going to happen, or at least somehow gaining fame and recognition, but again, doesn't really have the skills to do it. That being said, you could eventually build yourself up to that level, but this would be one of those realms that I would certainly classify as sort of playing on hard mode, just very difficult, lots of challenges, but again, could be rewarding, and especially if you can play that kind of role well. So his first or main primary plan here is trying to reclaim his lost territories that basically is Tornin now. Again, highly unlikely. The description here is, he's saying he could succeed, but his plans, at least the way they're described here, aren't very realistic. Trying to convince Darian Avan that it would be best to have that happen, but Avan, being the smarter or shrewd ruler that he is, certainly doesn't trust your regent here. And why would Avan want to basically let you reform this massive realm, basically with like 18 provinces again, and have that right on his border, and someone that he can't necessarily trust, or at least properly control. So Avan really just doesn't trust him, rightfully so. And yeah, basically, with your region's history of not really being anyone's friend or ally, doesn't seem like a smart move, right? You do have a couple of lieutenants. So you have your two cousins and your daughter, actually. And as it says here, basically just uses them as pawns, and they really just serve out of fear as to what you might do more than like wanting to. So, you'll get serviceable work out of them, but not as much as if you actually cared about the people that are serving you. So 9 provinces. So again, it does have a fortress, Sorrentier and Sorelies. That's more in the north. We'll take a look at that in a moment. But basically has a couple of knight units secretly training to burst into Tornin, which that's great and all, but even though Tornin, as we saw in our video, has like a minuscule army, I don't think 2 units of knights is going to cut it. And certainly I think other realms would probably step in, just because Tornin has kind of tried to, at least in the story, cultivate as much goodwill and neutrality as possible. So you would certainly be seen as the aggressor unless you really pulled off some sort of shrewd moves to make that happen. But here we go on the important NPC side. So Gilder Kalian of Endir owns much of the trade in Alamie, very true, although Meli Barian from Kiriel is also making inroads there. And Gorian Hiriel of the Highland Overland Traders also. So you kind of have like a 3-way battle going on there, although Killian usually has the most power and influence there. So the Guilder has made it clear that the southern provinces answer to him, and when the law, whatever law there is, steps in to remove any of Kalian's operation, usually ends up with some dead bodies. But on the other hand, the Duke has let Kalian know that Alamie won't support any guild activity that doesn't pay tribute to the crown. Burned warehouses and raids on illegal operations have cut into Kalian's interest. So you have kind of this like covert war kind of going on behind the scenes that sometimes spills out into reality here. That being said, we don't really get any idea from a description here as to like if he is in fact getting any kind of tribute out of the guilds, how he's taxing them. But again, that gives you sort of a room to basically work on that with the DM, and the DM can maybe set that up for you to determine what your situation actually is there. And even though this focuses on Kalian only, again, we need to recognize, and your DM would be well advised to look at the other guild stakeholders there, and really play up just this sort of not just 3-way battle, I guess, on the guild side, but really if you factor in Alam wanting to somehow get a piece of the action and not be intimidated, it's almost like a 4-way struggle there. So, but if you were a shrewd player, you could certainly at some point work to get that to your advantage, and maybe promise more official support to one of the guild entities to deal with the competition, maybe, and thin that out a little bit. So ideally, you probably don't want to work with Kalian just because he already has too much influence. But bringing the other outsiders in and developing them more will have its own risks and rewards there for you too. And then finally, a little bit on the geography here, which honestly takes up like half the description here. So basically, it's one giant flat plains with just row, or not row, but nothing but basically farmland as far as the eye can see, mainly corn. So as it says here, unless you get to the northern mountains nearing like the Five Peaks, it's basically flat, featureless, and waves of corn and the smell of fertilizer. So and if you look at our video on Tornin, right, we talked about the pride that they have in their country, almost to the point of being a little bit arrogant about it. And here it's kind of the reverse, except basically it's anyone from Alamie really hates the people from Tornin, and apparently uh, tend to apparently do bad things, take out their frustrations on anybody from Tornin that they might find crossing through there. So be prepared for that. And something again that a DM can work in different ways too. And this again, not just from running this as a country, perhaps, but even adventuring in here. So that could be something that could build up some adventure hooks and stuff like that. And then the people in the capital, as it says here, are somewhat more reasonable, although still dislike the tours. But it's at least maybe superficial friendliness, but just don't bring up the subject of their neighbors, basically. And to make matters worse, though, if again you were approaching this as far as running the domain, much like Tornin, where you're also kind of stuck with all kinds of threats on all your different borders. Alamie is in the same spot, but I think overall just in a weaker position. As it says here, stuck with a large border on Gore and Moriad, the realm must tread a delicate line to avoid defending one of those two powers. And really, if they wanted, either of them could wipe you out without too much trouble. And again, you really don't have any allies cultivated, so you'd, I think, fold pretty quickly. It's usually safer to anger Moriad, but one can push even the more only so far. Alamians must also worry about the threat of brigandage from the Five Peaks. And finally, they know that Avenel lies merely a province away, should the prince choose to march through Tornin or Endir. Therefore, Alamie wants to regain the territory that Tornin now holds to place more land between Avenel and Lofton. So again, let's not forget Avenel does have designs on regaining the throne. And we've already talked about the powerhouse that his domain is, and certainly militarily, not much is going to stop him in the Heartlands. So just to kind of get into what was being said here. So, Tornin's a larger territory. They have their own issues, but you share a large western border with them. Your capital is basically right across from their capital. But the northern province here, where you have your fortress, along with Nortmore, is again rather undeveloped. And I think this was supposed to be a former territory of Alamie. As you can see, not much is developed there. But here's where you supposedly have those two secret units of knights training to get into Tornin. Again, I'm not sure what just that minuscule amount is going to accomplish, and really you'd probably be better served trying to build up and settle these provinces, and also to avoid attacks from the Five Peaks at some point. A long-term goal here would be to maybe reclaim or get into that other territory of the Five Peaks there, not just to extend your realm, but there's other avenues that you could be taking there, and working to in some ways control some of the trade too, because you'd be getting closer to the source of at least one of the rivers here. But as you kind of work your way south, it's a little bit more settled, right? We have the province where Lofton is. This is that one that's your highest settled province here, Ella or Rowan, at 5. But then as we get into the south here, you can see that this is more where Endir is operating, and that's where a lot of the guild issues are coming into play there, where he's trying to sort of run those provinces even though they're part of your domain. And so it's kind of that back and forth that we saw in the description there. Interestingly, at the confluence of these two rivers here, even though there's a larger swamp area here, that could be something that could be developed too, where you could start maybe taxing some of the traffic that is heading further down towards Endir, and maybe dealing with him a little bit that way by controlling some of that river traffic and what you let through to maybe affect his trade. So at some point, again, building up here, you really don't want to threaten the Moor, just because he's kind of seen as like the first line of defense against some of the non-humans here, but also is generally viewed as a decent enough ruler. Gore, realistically, you're not going to build up a military force to challenge him anytime soon. And both these guys have, I think we saw like armies around like 15 to 18 to start with. So not really worth considering trying to get into a military conflict with these guys. Same thing with Tornin again. Even though they have a bigger army than you, it's not necessarily that you wouldn't eventually be able to build up a force to take on them. But again, I don't think any of the neighbors would just stand by and let that happen. And Avenel is like literally right there. So even though he might not overtly be allied with Tornin, he probably again doesn't want you expanding your territory that way. So you got to certainly tread carefully and actually start cultivating relationships here, because at the outset here you're certainly isolated and no one really is sort of favorably disposed towards you. But you can work towards building up your economy, sort of settling the guild situation, making use of what's going on the religious side there to perhaps further settle and at least make up for your initial lack of military there. You might convince the Western Imperial Temple to maybe sort of go crusading here and help you reclaim that province, and maybe get them to build maybe some fortifications and other things like that to help you do some of the heavy lifting initially. But overall, working on settling and maybe raising up the population of your land a little bit to help really build up a actual economy that isn't at the mercy of the guilds, and building up your law. And I would say, at least initially, starting off in the northern territories, getting your law built up there a little bit, and then working your way south to eventually sort of find a sort of final solution to dealing with Endier. So lots of possibilities there, but let us know in the comments, guys, what you have experienced in your campaigns as far as running Alamie as a territory, or just adventuring in and around there. Be really interested to hear from you guys. Hit us up in the comments. Hope you guys enjoyed hanging out with us, taking a look at that territory today. Leave us a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and we'll be continuing on with our Birthright domain reviews. Take care.